Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. This is the last time I will probably mention this, but I've had so many people come up to me over the last 2 months and tell me about the rock bass phenomena in New England. Now, I've mentioned it before, and it sounds like, oh, isn't that interesting? Because we've always considered rock bass just one of the panfish. A lot of people don't consider them as good eating as crappies or perch or whatever, but rock bass can be pretty good. They're really easy to catch. They'll hit just about anything. They don't fight much, but they're a panfish, and that's how we've always considered them, I believe. However, rock bass are not native to a lot of the waters in New England. And what has happened is somehow they've been introduced. If they're not native, they're an invasive species. Remember this. But they've been introduced to some of the lakes in New Hampshire. And the most famous lake that I have ever known of in New Hampshire for wonderful bass fishing is Lake Winnipesaukee. It's a big, grand, beautiful lake with surrounding. In fact, one of the little lakes that is near Winnipesaukee is Squam Lake, and that's where they filmed the movie on Golden Pond. It is just breathtakingly beautiful. But with all that beauty aside, with the rock bass invading these waters, from what fishermen tell me, and I'm talking to really serious tournament bass fishermen that live to be able to go out in waters like this and catch bass. And for years, they've been able to do it. Now, because the rock bass have got in there, the rock bass have multiplied. I mean, multiplied. Their numbers have increased tremendously. Like we view the gobies that have come into our area. When they first came into the St. Lawrence, we thought that's going to be the end of our great fishing. They're an invasive species that's going to destroy it all. Well, that's what's happening up in Lake Winnipesaukee. The rock bass schools of 100, 200, 300 bass will move into the shallows, and they will dominate in those shallows. So now the smallmouth bass have vacated those areas, and they're in deeper water. So their whole spawning cycle, everything is really affected. Plus, when a person goes out to fish in this lake now, and they're using their bass lures and their bass tackle, instead of catching smallmouth bass, strike after strike, and they're bringing in a rock bass. They don't want a rock bass. The state says you got to kill these rock bass. You can't put them back in the water. You will be breaking the law if you don't instantly kill them. And I don't think that's going to have one bit of impact because like what we've seen with other invasive species, they multiply and they start affecting the ecosystem that they've been introduced in. And that's what's happening there. It's something that I think is important to remember because the impact in today's age with climate shifting and water and air temperatures changing has caused a lot of animals, birds, and fish that didn't exist in one area to migrate into that area and really affect the overall balance of the system in that specific region. And so when we talk about invasive species, remember, there's a big danger in that. And that's why the DEC is so observant and so critical about different things that you can do. Not being able to transport bait, not using felt on the bottom of your boots because it will transport organisms from one body of water to another and could have a serious negative effect. And so what are we going to do other than do whatever we can to be more careful? I think that's the best advice that we all can live by is to just be more vigilant and more careful about what we do. Keep our boat clean. Don't let organisms piggyback onto the boat and go to another lake and then affect the very balance that exists in that lake. So that's my story about rock bass, but it's not a good one. It's one that it's puzzling. We don't have that problem here, but they're part of our system. They have been for years. They weren't in New Hampshire, and now there's a big red flag out. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.